Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for helping us raise some money for First Robotics. Make sure you check out the donation link in the show notes. My name is Bobby Lynn, IG13525, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing the host of This Week in Star Wars, author of Skywalker: A Family at War, mother of Hector Smidget, and Frog Lady enthusiast, Kristin Baver.
Hello, Bobby. Thank you for having me. And also, that is a great introduction. I mean, I might have put Hector Smidget and Frog Lady Enthusiast even in the top two personally, but you know what? That was great.
But
It wasn't in,
let's
in
start
order of
over.
importance.
Okay.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am functioning within normal parameters. Thank you.
Sometimes that's all you got, and that's great. I'm fully operational currently, and I feel pretty good about it.
That's what we all need. You ready to answer some goofy Star Wars questions?
I would love nothing more.
Well, I guess my first question is, do you like Star Wars?
I've heard of the Star Wars. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard of it. It's the one with Captain Picard, right? Yeah.
Love him.
Yeah.
Make it
Yeah. They're
so.
fighting the Cylons.
Mm-hmm.
They go
You're
try and deposit the ring in Mordor, I think,
absolutely
at one point. Yeah. 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 I gotcha.
right. Huge fan. I knew it. I
Huge
knew it.
fan.
So, who is your favorite character from it? And is it the same character from your first viewing to now?
This is a hard question, actually, because I think my favorite character shifts depending on my mood a little bit, depending on what I need that day. Han Solo is usually a really good fallback. He was my favorite character when I was a kid. I love how funny he is. I love that he's one way on the outside. He's trying to pretend he's real tough, but he's a big, soft-hearted goof on the inside, and he's really gonna do the right thing in the end of the day. I think he's real relatable. And mostly I just think he's got some of the funniest lines and the best reaction faces. I
Absolutely.
think I have a pretty expressive face too. So I feel that when I see Han Solo and he makes some faces and it's perfection. But I also love Frog Lady. I love Yoda. I love
Mhm.
Akbar. I love Leia. I love Rey. I could just go on and on and on.
Do.
Omega. Love Omega. And
Well,
this
that's
is the problem too. Like we keep getting great new Star Wars, and then I'm like, nope, that one's my favorite. Wait, no, that one. Hang on, it's that one.
you're already answering my next question of what is your favorite film, and then now we have so many shows to pick from.
Yeah, yeah. Ooh.
What a
All
great
right.
time to be
So
Star Wars fans.
it is such a great time to love Star Wars and to be invested in it and to be so lucky to have so much new content coming at us and new shows, new films over the last several years. So my all-time favorite Star Wars movie, still The Empire Strikes Back. Return of the Jedi for a bit when I was a kid, but for most of my life, The Empire Strikes Back, and you know forever and ever. I don't think that will. It would be really tough to knock that off of first position for me, just because there's so
No
much
one's ever
that
going to disagree with that answer.
I know a lot of people who have that same answer. So yeah, I'm in good company with that. But also, I love The Force Awakens, love Revenge of the Sith, love Solo: A Star Wars Story. So
Mhm.
yeah. The theme here is that you tell me to pick one thing and I'm going to pick like seven. So sorry about that.
I'm the same way.
Um,
I totally get it.
yeah, yeah. Because and then again, I think it depends on the mood. I think I've said this before on StarWars.com, but A New Hope. I love A New Hope in general, but A New Hope is my sick day movie. If I'm feeling really lousy and I'm at home from work, I will put on A New Hope because if I fall asleep in the middle of that and I wake up and they're doing the trench run, I still know exactly where we are and what's happening. And then if I'm really, really feeling lousy, I'll continue on through the original trilogy. But
The
I
OT is
love
perfect
different
for
movies for
that.
different things. Absolutely, absolutely. But in terms of series, I love The Mandalorian. I know I'm not alone in that. Frog Lady T-shirt.
Mhm.
Uh, fellow Frog Lady enthusiast,
Oh,
Bobby.
yes.
Um, I love The Mandalorian, and one of the things I think I love about it the most is that I have some friends who are not Star Wars fans, and I I try not to make it my mission to introduce them to Star Wars and make them love it. But at the same time, if they get a little curious about it, I love
Mhm.
to, help them along on that journey and suggest things. And so I've had friends who have, maybe seen one of the movies. They're not big into Star Wars in the least. And I've introduced them to The Mandalorian and they've really enjoyed that format. They've enjoyed those characters. And it's just so accessible because especially, that first season, I'm on the same level as a huge Star Wars fan as they are as a complete newbie because we're all just meeting these characters for the first time. And it's been so great to see people take their first steps into that larger world with that and really, get invested, especially, the people who think, I don't know about this Star Wars stuff. And then the minute Grogu shows up and he pushes that little
Yeah,
blanket down, they're
everybody
done.
loves
They're
it.
done. They're like protect at all costs. Like it
Mhm.
triggers something in their brain on like a biological level. I love it. But also, obviously, big fan of our animation. And in terms of our animated series,
Mhm.
I adore Star Wars Rebels. I love them all, to be sure. I was just talking about how much I love Omega and the Bad Batch and Moochie. Love Moochie. But I really, really love Star Wars Rebels, and I think part of it was that was like my gateway Star Wars animation. I hadn't watched the Clone Wars at that point. Um, I had mistakenly thought the Clone Wars was for children, and I was too old for that. That was wrong. That was not correct.
It's for
I've been
everyone.
disabused of that notion. But when I was then coming into it, Rebels was the thing that was on currently. And so I thought, okay, I'll give this a try. And I was watching the very first episode, Spark of Rebellion, and they get to that point where the little Wookiee's in binders
Yes.
and he looks so sad. And it's like my friends with Grogu, where you get to the Wookiee and binders, and it was just like, why is my face wet? What's happening? And I just had such a visceral and emotional reaction to to that very first episode that I knew it was really something special. And once I started watching that, and I met Ahsoka that way. And then everyone else online is like, wow, Ahsoka's back. And I was like, what?
What do you
I
mean
need to go
bad?
back now. And I
Mhm.
need to find out all about her journey. So yeah,
Well, it makes you feel
so
better.
much good Star Wars though.
I'm here in Pittsburgh, so whenever you talk about Star Wars in Pittsburgh, Dave can hear you.
Right, right, yes. Because does everyone in Pittsburgh know Dave? I assume.
All the Star Wars fans do, of course.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, you guys are just when he comes back for family reunions, you're like, it's Dave. Dave's in town.
Dave's here. Yeah, but then all he wants to do is
Yes.
talk about sports.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of my favorite things, Dave is amazing
Mhm.
storyteller, knows so much about Star Wars. But I love that he's also from Pennsylvania and from Pittsburgh because my mother's side of the family's from Pittsburgh. I'm from Eastern Pennsylvania, originally
Okay.
born and raised. And so I feel like a little bit of that kinship connection that, I understand a bit of where he's coming from. We actually went to universities that are sister schools in the Pennsylvania state system of higher education.
Wow.
So there's a little bit of a connection.
That's awesome. So
And
family
we
reunion
also
coming up.
like the Star Wars, both of us, as it turns out.
What a small world. Well, since we were talking about all the projects and everything,
Sure.
there's so many things coming up. Is there anything in particular you are very excited about?
Oh, I am very excited for the ObiWan Kenobi series. I know nothing. I have seen nothing except for that beautiful logo with the sand and the eye made from the lightsaber hilt. But I'm just ecstatic that we're going to get more with that character and get to see some of that pocket of time. One of the things I really really felt more deeply in the last year or so as we were working on Skywalker Family at War was these massive pockets of in-universe time where we don't necessarily have any storytelling yet. And so I love when we get to explore some of those because it's really fertile ground where you have 20, 30 years between things. You know where the character came from, you know where they're going, but you have no idea what's happening in their life in that time period. And I'm so hungry to see what that is, as I'm sure you are, you and all of you
Yes,
watching at home.
absolutely. I think we're all very excited for Obi-Wan and Andor and
Or, oh, I love Cassian Andor too. I know the theme of this whole conversation is just Kristen loves and then like fill in the blank. But I love Cassian
If people
Andor.
didn't
I
want a
can't
list
wait
of
to
that,
see
they
more
shouldn't
about
have
him.
tuned into this. They should have known exactly that that's what you're gonna
Should
get.
know. Yes, yeah. You're gonna get things I love. You're gonna get some cat talk, some Star
Absolutely.
Wars love, you know.
Well, while we're doing things that Kristen loves, what are some of your favorite scenes throughout the? Well, I guess we can do
Ooh.
the shows and the movies now.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. Um, let's see. I love. There's just so many to choose from. It's like if you could be inside my brain right now, you would just see this like rapid fire of like screenshots. He's just like trying to deduce what to say. So I love anytime Yoda imparts wisdom. I love all of those scenes in Empire Strikes Back, and I was just flabbergasted when we got a little bit more of that in The Last Jedi, and he
Yes,
came
that was
back and he,
great.
imparted, and he always imparts words that the characters need to hear in that moment, but also like me, I as a person need to hear this sometimes, and the quote from The Last Jedi, of course, failure. I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not going to do the Yoda speak, but failure is the greatest teacher, and what a wonderful piece of wisdom to carry around and recognize that yes, failure is a great teacher, and it's okay to fail. It's okay not to be perfect all of the
Right.
time, and sometimes you learn more through the trial and error than you do from the success of things.
Mhm.
um Absolutely love Han and Leia. I love you, I know, obviously. uh
Of course.
Also absolutely love Han and Leia, I love you, I know, reversed in Return of the Jedi, of course.
Beautiful.
um the first time I saw The Force Awakens, I was so floored by Rey grabbing that lightsaber out of the snow. And I still just love that moment where, you've no idea where this is going. You think it's going one way, and then she gets it, and you are just as surprised as she is that
Mhm.
worked. um, what else? I love this is such maybe an odd thing to love, but in The Mandalorian, of course, I'm a big Grogu fan. I love Mando as well. But I think one of my favorite scenes from that whole series is when he's trying to teach Grogu how to fix things, and he's like in the little cubby with the wires, and he's like, no, 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 the
Exactly
red
like that
wire,
one. Yep.
that one, yeah. And it's this moment where does it further the plot really?
No,
Yes and no, because they're
but
always
it's
trying to fix that
real.
ship,
It feels so
but
real and
it's
perfect.
so real. And it reminded me also, I think, of being a kid, and me being a curious child, asking my parents always like, how does this work? Why do we do this? What is this? And my dad being very mechanically minded, he would teach me about uh you know the what different like tools, like different screwdrivers do, and things like that, when I was like a very small child, always within safe parameters. He wasn't like, here's a drill, go to town, have fun. But I think that's part of why that scene resonates with me too, because like I look at that and I think, yeah, this is just like a dad figure trying to teach a child how to do something for himself, and just getting frustrated because it's not translating.
Mhm.
It's just very relatable.
Well, since you brought up your childhood, what was your first contact with Star or any of the other Lucasfilm products? I mean, I know you
Mm,
love Indy. I
I
love
do love
Willow.
Indy. Yes. So actually, Willow, I kind of missed the first time around. Willow was a later discovery for me, but definitely grew up with Indy. Um, and I think I was I was still, I think, in elementary school when I first discovered Star Wars. And it was kind of, if my memory serves, kind of by accident that I was like flipping through channels, or I think I was mostly watching the Sci-Fi Channel at that point because we had just gotten a satellite dish, and I was like, this is
Ooh.
amazing. Look at all of this just sci-fi content for me. And I discovered it that way. And I distinctly remember like not so much the moment, but like a feeling of like, yes, this thing is mine, because my whole family loves Star Trek as well.
Mhm.
And that was something I had been introduced to, more in the sense of like, my parents love this and they're watching it, and would I like to watch it with them? And then they'll explain things to me. But this was more like oh no, I discovered this semi on my own, I think, just through flipping channels. But I also remember around the same time that I got the Chewbacca and the R2D2 Power of the Force action figures on those orange cards.
With the nice
Uh,
big wide
I love it.
shoulders.
Yes, yes. And so I got those one Christmas around that same time. So I'm not sure which came first necessarily, but I think probably I discovered them and started talking about, hey, I discovered this new movie that I really like. And my parents were like, that is not quite new, but we're glad you like it. And here's some action figures. And that just, blew the doors off of it. And they signed me up for the Star Wars fan club, and I started getting the Star Wars Insider, and I was like, wow, there's a whole magazine devoted to this thing. No idea, of course, she's a kid, and I was like, oh wow, other people like this thing that I love. Who knew?
Well, speaking of more things that you love, I love them too. Books.
Yes.
Fan of the book club here.
Yes, thank you.
If people wanted to get into Star Wars books or comics,
Mm-hmm.
either or,
Mm-hmm.
what are your top recommendations?
So there's so
obviously.
many. So I'm not going to say that one. That one seems too obvious. I'll let you say that one if you like.
I'll give you the plug later when we're talking about the book.
All right, fair. I certainly love that book a lot and have quite a connection to it. But in terms of other books that I am purely reading as a fan and a reader and enjoying them, not as a writer, absolutely The Legends of Luke Skywalker. Adore this book. I think it's such a fresh take because the whole time you're reading it, because it's essentially like a group of travelers swapping stories about what they think Luke Skywalker is, you never really know if any of this is factually true. You never really know if any of this happened, and you can have all kinds of interesting debates and back and forth about it. But I love when Star Wars allows us to have those conversations and to say, wow, I didn't see that from my point of view, I saw this other thing, and to have that kind of just more of like a personal response to things where neither answer is necessarily correct and neither answer is necessarily wrong. It's just right. That is what you took from it. So definitely Legends of Luke Skywalker, definitely Bloodline. Love Claudia Gray. She's amazing. And
Claudia's fantastic. So yay, Claudia.
She's so great. She's so great. Marvel's Princess Leia run was my entry point into Star Wars comics. And I will always go back to that one in part because I just love Terry Dotson's art style, but also because I was also, I know I said I was a Han kid and I absolutely was, but of course I also really loved Princess Leia growing up. And so to see her have some more time where she's fully in the spotlight in that run, and to see her headbutting these massive aliens to get out of situations is just phenomenal, and I absolutely love it. Last Shot, love Last Shot. Always give me some more Han content, but also Daniel Jose Older just does an amazing job with Han and Lando and all of the complexities of being a smuggler who's also now a father, who's also a husband. What do you even do with this? So out of his element, but then essentially invited to be back in his element, in part because he has to go save the galaxy.
Of course.
Again, of course. There's a little kitster there in the inflection. I'm just going to keep listing Queen Shadow.
Go ahead.
In a similar fashion, I think, to maybe the Princess Leia comic for me, I loved that Queen Shadow gave us so much more of a window into Padme and her passions and kind of what she was going through in her transitional period from being a young queen, a 14-year-old queen elected on Naboo, to being a senator and having a different set of requirements to take care of her people, but still very much that same drive to want to take care of them. And also that pull to maybe go back to Tatooine and maybe help save Shmi Skywalker, but she can't be two places at once. So maybe one of her helpful handmaidens can pinch hit for her, as they often do. And we got weaponized fashion, which I just think is amazing. E.K. Johnston, I adore her writing. Although I will say, I'm not going to spoil it, but the very beginning of that book and the very end of that book, those two scenes are beautifully written so that they are incredibly similar. I see you nodding because you know.
I know. I read it. I loved it.
But it rips my heart out every time. in a good way, I think. In a
in
good
the
way.
exact way I'm sure she wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. And also one other comic I always recommend to people is The Rise of Kylo Ren. I think it's
Yes.
such an important chapter in Ben Solo's formative years, and it helps explain so much of how we think he might have been, as the son of rebel heroes and, these two amazing people who we know and love, and how he would have gotten to the point where we find him in The Force Awakens.
Well, since you're gushing how much you love Indy and Han, would you rather
Yes.
go on an adventure with Han and Short Round or Indy and Chewbacca?
I don't think Han Solo and Short Round would get along well.
Absolutely not. No, they
I don't
wouldn't.
think I'd want to be in the middle of that. I'd rather be on an adventure, I think, with Dr. Jones and a towering Wookiee. I think I think there's a lot of Harrison Ford potentially in both of those characters, and so I think what Indy brings to the table, he would absolutely still get along well with Chewbacca and figure out a way to make that partnership work before Han and Short Round would. Yeah, they probably wouldn't even get out of the spaceport without completely bickering and just having a massive fight. So yeah, I'll take my chances with the Wookiee and Dr. Jones.
I love that we're on the same wavelength on this. That makes me so happy.
I
So,
do love Short Round, but I just don't think Han and the kid traveling together
no.
it's not going to end well for anyone. And I don't want to be on that trip. I'll be like, "Where's the escape pod? Can I just drop me off at a moon? It's fine. It's fine."
So, if you were to make a National Geographic style documentary, what planet would you do it about? And remember, Duck World is an option.
Oh, all right. So if I pick Mustafar, am
Ooh,
I going to get force choked during this expedition?
we doing it while Vader's still there? Is it way after?
I mean, I'd like to think maybe he's away. And so you can explore some things without him being present, because I think he might not take well to, a whole production team touching down and trying to explore Mustafar. Um, but I do think that whole planet is just fascinating. For a safer answer, a non-force choky answer, I would pick Naboo. If I definitely don't want to get force choked, I think Naboo is fairly safe. Again, depends if Vader's around, I think. Like that's the new theme here now. Don't go where Vader might be.
Avoid Vader at all times?
Avoid Vader. Avoid Vader.
That is great advice.
Just good
What,
life
dro-
advice,
what droid would you want to have as a companion? Either like a specific
Ooh.
character one or just like a more
Mm-hmm.
generic model?
Mm-hmm. My knee jerk is always C3PO, but I'm not going to say C3PO because my knee jerk is C3PO because I love that character so much. And I also find that I have some similarities to that character. And I don't want to travel with myself. So I
That's
would
fair.
pick R2D2.
Okay.
He's sassy, as far as we can tell from how C3PO responds to him. He's great in a pinch. He can fly. He can talk to other computers. He's arguably the one that saves the day more times than any other actually organic being in
Absolutely.
the entire Skywalker saga. So I would pick R2D2 because I think he's great in a pinch, but he's also going to be funny and pretty blunt. I think about it. As long as you can
Everybody loves
understand his
R2.
astromech beeps. Everybody loves R2.
So, do you have a random Star Wars fact that you think that more people need to know?
Yes. Yes.
Ooh.
So I think a lot of people may know this already, but it was news to me a couple years ago when I discovered it at the Star Wars Power of Costume exhibit at the Smithsonian. But when they were filming the water scenes in The Phantom Menace, the vintage wool that they made the cloaks out of for Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan kept shrinking up. Like within minutes, they'd be in the water and they'd be coming out of the lake and it would just shrink up to knee height. So every single take, they had to have a new vintage wool cloak for those two because it was a one take and then you couldn't use that again unless you're shooting, I guess, from the waist up. And so they needed to get a new one and it would shrink up again. And I love that because I just keep picturing them being like, oh, okay, we got to make like 12 more cloaks just so we can keep them in the water a little bit longer.
Well, you win. I didn't know that. So there you go.
Yay! All
Yes,
right, good. Good,
we're
good,
all
good.
learning a thing.
Good. Okay.
So, what is your fondest piece of memorabilia or
Ooh.
greatest fan moment? Either you getting to interact with somebody you're a fan of, or vice versa, somebody that was a fan of you, getting to meet you. Not including this.
Mm.
This doesn't count. I mean, this is that, but
Count.
let's
This
pick a
can
different one.
count. Sure, sure. If I can have two answers on that, I'll answer it, I
Absolutely.
think, in both ways. One of my favorite pieces of memorabilia came from my friend Amy Rakow. She does 365 Star Wars. She also writes for StarWars.com. And she had interviewed me when she was doing 365 Star Wars Women. And when I saw her at, I believe it was Star Wars Celebration Chicago, she had made these great trading cards with all kinds of different female characters from Star Wars, as well as some creators. And so she had made me a trading card of
That's so
myself,
cool.
which is so amazing. And she gave me some other great ones too. Like I think I have Ray and a couple other ones, but it was such like a weird, wonderful moment to just feel like, here is my face and my name on a trading card. That is not something I ever thought I would say. And I just adore that. And I think she's also just a phenomenal writer and, a wonderful friend as well. I will say in terms of being a fan and having my job, we always try, obviously really hard to be professional and, to not nerd out too much. But I love Anthony Daniels. My sister and I were big fans of his column that was an Insider when we were kids. And I got the chance to interview him when his autobiography came out. And it was just such a wonderful 45-minute sit down. And then after we were done, he was leaving and he held the door for me. And I just thought, this is something that this is a story I will keep telling, because if you could get like a TARDIS and go back in time and tell 10-year-old Kristin, hey, one day, I know you really like that droid. One day the actor behind that's going to hold a door for you because he's a gentleman. I would have thought, this is weird, future redheaded person. Maybe you need to get back into your police box and go. So just what a wonderful moment of just human kindness too, which I think is my favorite part of interviewing anyone and interacting with fans or people who work in Star Wars, is just talking on a really human level about something that is important to all of us.
Well, since you brought up being a professional, let's talk about that a little bit.
All right.
Some of your
Great
favorite
segues. I love it.
Oh, I totally am doing this off the cuff. I haven't been rehearsing in my head for weeks at all.
You're
What are,
doing great.
Thank you. High praise from Kristin Baver. What have been some of your fondest memories of doing this week in Star Wars?
Ooh. This week in Star Wars is an interesting time capsule for me because we started that show in January of 2020. And I thought that was going to go one direction, as we all did. And then by March of that year, I was shooting from home. And, that's a completely different thing.
Right.
It's a completely different beast. And, to go from being in the studio and still, very much getting used to being in front of the camera and using the teleprompter and all of that stuff, to also, making sure the lighting is right and also checking on the audio and other things like that. So just a really interesting set of challenges and a really interesting way to learn some skills that I never knew I would need, but just kind of on the fly, having such a wonderful team on the production side, who, even though we couldn't be in the same room for months, were able to be very patiently teach me everything I would need to know to shoot the raw footage, and then they would still take it and edit it together and use the graphics and still make it look beautiful, far better than just, hey, I'm sitting on this chair in my living room in front of this. This is not the set, but you've seen the set. It's like a bookshelf with some of my favorite things on it, and books and collectibles and toys and action figures. And so the fact that they can take that footage and still make it look polished and professional and like a show is I love. And I just so appreciate that I have that team behind me, and also that they taught me some of the things that I would need to know, to make sure that we could keep it going. Although I will say, with that, enormous caveat there of how strange and wonderful this whole trip has been with this week. I think some of my favorite memories are when we were in studio, but also still sometimes now, because we do shoot with the production team on the Zoom call to be there in the virtual room, kind of like you and I are now. And my favorite moments are usually when I try something and I can see or hear one of them laughing. And so I know it's working, because in my mind, it might be funny, or I'm not sure if it's going to be funny, but like I need to see that reaction. And one of the difficult things, I think, with either being a writer or, shooting something that then goes on to live a life as a video, but without that live component, sometimes you don't know how it's going to be received. So just to get like a little bit of that instantaneous feedback is always really, really helpful. And also just makes me feel like, okay, no, at least one person thought that was funny. Hopefully more people will.
And then we get to see that magic every Thursday on Star Wars YouTube channel.
Yes.
Every Thursday. Yes. Hint, hint.
Yes, every Thursday.
Plugs for you.
Thank you.
So you brought up the Star Wars Insider multiple times, so might as well move into this whole thing of you and your career as a writer, because you do write for Star Wars, the Insider and StarWars.com, and then we'll get to that book eventually. But can we talk about how you became a writer, why you wanted to become a writer, and that journey?
Sure. I think that I know that I discovered my passion for writing very young. I remember I was about 8 years old, and I started writing my own little fiction stories about my stuffed animals, of course, and then making up new characters. And they were all animal based, and they were all like very anthropomorphized and wearing clothes and had like names that were very alliterative. And I just really enjoyed that type of creativity, and for lack of a better word, world building. Because when you're 8 years old, that's what passes for world building, I think. And I've been writing truly ever since. Either creating stories, or then when I was a teenager, I started writing for our local paper, the Reading Eagle. They had a high school section that was all teen writers. And I think that was my first, professional byline, was in a newspaper. And I remember I bought like a fat stack of those newspapers when that edition came out, because I thought, look, it's real. My name is in print. I wrote a thing, and now people can read it. And then I really fell in love with journalism, which I studied professional writing at Kutztown University in Pennsylvania. And one of the tracks was journalism, and you could do a number of other things with it. You studied marketing and public relations and technical writing, and some other types of essentially writing that you could get a full-time job doing. And I just really fell hard in love with journalism while I was there. And then for a number of years, I worked at a daily newspaper before I started working full-time at StarWars.com.
I want to come back to all that, but since we're talking about you being a writer,
follow-up questions, I love them.
Do you have advice for people that want to get into writing?
Yes. That's a great question, because it feels like such a mountain to climb, I think, especially when you're starting out. And so I think, the number one piece of advice is keep going, and, try to persevere. There are so many days where even though I am a writer, I get paid to write. There are so many days where I don't really feel like writing. You just have to. It's like, I want to have written. I love the final product after it's done. I'm excited about sharing, whatever the story is out with the world, but there are just some days where it feels like a slog. It feels like work, but that's okay. You got to persevere through those. There are other days that it feels like a joy. And honestly, like I had a managing editor at the newspaper where one time I remember I wrote a story, and I came back, I came into his office and I was so excited about it. And I said, that story basically just wrote itself. And he was like, that is definitely not true. That's not how that works. But there are some stories that, you get in there and you start talking to people and the story starts to kind of form in your brain. And this happens with creative writing too, where, it's sort of like it comes to you in bits and pieces and then you just have to write it down. It's not a slog. It's a delight in those cases. And not every story is going to be like that, but you keep persevering to keep getting to more of those stories. And also, I think another piece of advice that I wish I had maybe known earlier, but I think you kind of receive it when you're willing and able to hear it, is that editors are there to make your stories better. It's not a slight when they change things or tell you to redo something. They're there because they want it to be the best it can be. And it was really important for me on my own trajectory as a writer to learn how to accept that constructive criticism and use it for the next one to keep bettering what I was producing. But when you're starting out, sometimes that can feel very it's hard to hear it. It's hard to hear that what you've written and what put some blood, sweat, and tears into is less than perfect right out of the gate. But you do need to hear that, and you do need to get some of that constructive criticism so that you can be a clearer communicator or a better storyteller, or all of those things combined, so that you keep getting to be a better and better writer.
Of course. So you've mentioned the journalism history, that being your first professional writing gig and everything.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get your current job that you have with Lucasfilm and everything?
Yeah. So when I was a journalist full time, I was also a freelance writer for a number of different places. And mostly, I think that was born out of, I was starting to feel like I didn't think I wanted to be in hard news journalism forever. I didn't think that that was necessarily my, career path anymore. But I wasn't sure what else I would love doing and where I should go next. So I was doing a number of freelance gigs to just try and kind of figure out what, try things on without the scariness of quitting my job and jumping into it full time and then going, oh, we're 2 days in and I don't really like this. So I had like the safety net of the job I already loved, but knew that I probably didn't want to stick with for the next, 20, 30 years. And I started to dabble. And one of the things I was lucky enough to be able to dabble in was as a freelance writer for StarWars.com. And I think they just couldn't get rid of me at some point, because I was just like, as soon as they let me in the door, I made it my mission to try and write an article like at least once a week for them. And I remember like I was in Pennsylvania at the time, but there was that Smithsonian exhibit that we talked about before with Power of the Costume. And it was in DC, which was, 3.5 hour drive for me. But I was like, I really want to go there and cover this. Can I do this? So just, taking those chances and, just really trying to kind of put myself out there to do as much as I could for the site, not really thinking that it would necessarily ever turn into anything that it has for sure. But just knowing that I loved that work so much. And so once I started doing it, I just wanted to, I'm like Kylo Ren in the GIF where I was just like, more. So I did that for about 1.5 years before my job actually even opened up. So, again, totally not flying blinds per se, but definitely flying into it just thinking like, I love this thing, I love writing about this, they let me do this is great. And then just really lucking out on the timing and already having all of that experience very specifically tailored to the job I have now, to be able to say, I can do this. Here's my portfolio lives on your site already, essentially.
Well, speaking of your portfolio, I think it's about time we jump into this.
Yes. I feel like I should have a copy too, just like at anywhere near me at all times, just in case.
Just put a poster behind you or something, just to.
Oh, yeah. No. So you mentioned the poster. There are no posters that I know of, but let's take a moment to be so thankful for that Matt Ferguson cover, because he is a genius. And I was floored the first time I saw it. But then, the more I looked at it, the more details came about. My very favorite detail, probably, the whole thing is beautiful.
Yes.
But my very favorite detail is on the spine where he's incorporated that tiny Anakin in the shadow. And it's such a homage to that original Phantom Menace poster, the teaser poster, that I adore. But the first time I saw it, I thought, this is so amazing. And I'm okay if people judge this book by the cover. That's fine. Judge away. It's great.
All right, well, we're going to keep talking about you being a journalist.
Okay.
Clearly, you utilize that skill when making this book happen.
Yeah.
So can we dive into how those two worked hand in hand?
Yeah. So it was such an interesting way to turn the skill set on its head a little bit, because normally as a journalist, you're digging into records, but you're also talking to people, and you're getting a lot of firsthand information if it's available. And of course, in this case, I couldn't call up Leia Organa and be like, so how are you feeling that one time when you were stuck between Tarkin and Darth Vader? This is apparently the tone that I would affect with Leia Organa. I don't know why. And right. So it was interesting because, on one hand, I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that normally as a journalist I would do, trying to talk to people because these people are fictional. But on the other hand, I have so much great information and detailed accounts, and I literally can like fly on the wall, look at things as they're happening, and then try and kind of deduce how a biographer would incorporate that and how much detail to use, and which parts are really essential to telling the life story of 3 generations of this family versus something that I love as a fan, but maybe this isn't really the time or place to get into it in deep detail.
I absolutely love that the way you wrote this is the fact that you're like somebody living in it. This isn't just, here's the plot of this episode, here's the plot of this movie. It's, this happened to this place that I am in, and this is how it affected these people. I mean, was that your brainchild that, you came up with that?
I believe so, because I know from the outset, and these things always kind of percolate in that way where, it's a collaborative effort to, people are bouncing ideas around and you're trying to, figure out what makes the most sense. But I remember just initially when we started talking about what could a biography look like, my initial, knee-jerk response was, well, these characters feel real to me and so many other fans, and it feels like these things happened and that we know these people, and so I think we need to treat it with that level of respect, essentially, and I think it will make for a better story. Now what's interesting is once we were on that path, I was reading Joseph Campbell just to get in the mindset of the starting point and what created this modern mythology, but I was also reading sometimes like a Rolling Stone interview with George Lucas from around the time of the prequel trilogy to get a better understanding of what he was thinking at the time and where he was driving with these characters, so then I could make sure that as sort of the journalist on the case, I was representing these things authentically and factually, and as unbiased as I could be. So it was just a really interesting way to play around with a story that so many of us know so well, but maybe tell that story from a slightly different perspective. And certainly I believe this is the first time that we've been able to incorporate not only the 9 Skywalker saga films, but also the books and the comics and the animated series and all of that other great storytelling that comes into play that really enriches our understanding of what we see on screen. If you've only seen the films, that's you understand the story, but if you take it a couple steps further and you investigate the books, if you read the comics, if you watch the animated content, you definitely, it just keeps building on that. And so I think we definitely wanted to make sure that this book felt like it was incorporating all of that.
You definitely do.
Thank you.
So my next question.
Tall order. It was a tall order. I admit, as excited as I was as I started making my reading and watch list, because I rewatched everything And I reread a number of things, and I read some things for the very first time because they were being created as we were writing. And, just so there were some days where I thought, this is too much information. I don't know how we're going to get all of this into, the page count and the format that we have without it, being a 3-volume set. Or like one of those
Right.
Encyclopedia Britannicas where it's like, for 27 volumes, we'll tell you about the Skywalkers. Like, there's so much information. So sometimes we were really distilling and synthesizing things to, the broad strokes. And thank goodness we did too, because the book was done and I saw the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. And I thought, uh-oh, that's not in the story. But there is an element of that covers that period of
Right.
Luke's life already. So honestly, to me, it doesn't feel like anything's missing. But that's the other interesting thing, I think, with Star Wars. Like we were talking about Kenobi before. It's such a living, breathing thing that there's always all of this new storytelling happening, on screen and in comics and, in publishing and in games and just across all these platforms, in virtual reality sometimes, that, I, at the very beginning, I thought, I'm going to put it all in there. And then, it's still in the Anakin section when I thought, I can't put it all in there because the Anakin will be his own book, maybe 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can get on to the other Skywalkers. So I was like, no, we're just going to have to kind of take it down to the really important moments and themes, and make sure that we're covering everything, but it can't be on this day this happened, on this day this
Right.
happened, covering everything that we have.
You're making this so easy to segue into my next question, because my next question was going to be, was there anything that you wanted to include but couldn't because we didn't want, a book this thick?
Sure. I think there were definitely some times that I wanted to talk more about some characters than we really had time or necessity to talk through. Like, for example, I think there's maybe about a chapter on Ahsoka and her relationship with Anakin and how that impacts him. And I could have talked about Ahsoka all day long. I love that character. I think her journey is fascinating. There's so much about her trajectory that is, Anakin is such a foil to. And, you could do a whole book just on Ahsoka and Anakin based on what we know about them.
That's your next
But
book.
but I also knew that, we needed to keep the lens on Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I think in a very early draft, I had talked a lot more about Ahsoka and, all of the things that she was getting up to, even, without Anakin sometimes. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, we have to scale this back because Anakin's not even there for this. This is not a biography of Ahsoka. So sometimes it was it was a challenge to pick those things. Han's another one, I'll just say it again. I was a Han kid. I love Han Solo. Han is not the focus. So, the Han is definitely in there, just like Padme is in there, because they're incredibly important to the Skywalker family. They marry into it. But at the same time, we really had to be choosy as to where we were kind of letting the lens land, because, again, we had to get through 3 generations in one book.
Right. Well, while you were picking and choosing your topics, was there anything that came up that you knew had to be in here because it's important, but you were dreading because it's like, like Han dying? I still cry when Han dies.
Yeah, no, same. And I don't even really like to talk about it because somehow it feels like a spoiler still, even though it's like 6 years later. Like, if I'm talking in public about it, I'll be like, yeah, that moment at the end of Force Awakens, that hurts my heart. The one. Like, I don't even like to say it in public in case like somebody walks by me, I guess, and is like, what?
Right.
Han dies? Of course, we're well past the spoiler window for that. I think I did have a bit of a heavy heart going into that sequence. But honestly, the book was writing the book was very cathartic in a lot of ways. Not only because it was 2020 and I was, stuck at home, and it was just a joy to be able to immerse myself in this story and, write this book. But also, I felt like the journey of researching and making sure that I was, being as unbiased as possible with these characters and being compassionate to them also helped me kind of rectify some things for myself as a fan, which was really fascinating. I think if you're showing Ben Solo compassion and trying to give that compassionate view to his journey, it still really stings when you get to that point and when I had to write it, but it's made, there's a little bit of a salve, I guess, happening when then you get to the other point where he's on Kefir and he's just been healed in The Rise of Skywalker. Again, I feel like, can I talk about it? It's been 2 years. We're probably safe, but I feel like, what if someone who's watching hasn't seen it? Yeah, and I think another challenge was, it wasn't so much that I was dreading it, but the chapter on Vader's redemption. It was such an important moment for the family, for the story, but also walking into it knowing that for so many fans, we've all seen Return of the Jedi countless times, and so you have this expectation of what you already bring to it, what you already love about the scene. And throughout the whole book, we wanted to make sure we weren't just retelling things, because that could get kind of dry. Right. And that wasn't what we wanted to do here. So we really had to like dig in and really add a lot of insight, I think, to that whole exchange and where Luke and Vader are coming from in that moment, and what actually makes that scene so beautiful. But it was it was a challenge, and it was also a little terrifying, knowing that I'm writing this such an important scene, for the story, but also for the fans, and hoping that we're doing it justice.
Oh, you absolutely did.
Thank you.
Not to blow smoke, but I really enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you.
You covered the whole span of all of it. Was there one specific area or era you were more excited to jump to than another?
It's hard, and I feel like a lot of writers say this, but it's like whatever I was writing at the moment was my favorite section, and then I would move on to the next one. I was like, no, this one's real good too. But I think I was most excited about actually the sequel trilogy section, because with the original trilogy, the part 2 on the twins, I had spent a lot of time with those characters, thinking about them, years upon years. So I had already made up, my mind on a lot of aspects of that, and the insights that I had been gleaned from, watching those things over and over again, and having that be, such a part of my brain space. But with the sequel trilogy, because it was newer, I hadn't had as much time to like soak in those characters or really think about their motivations or their psychology. So it was really fun to get to do that and feel like, we were telling a story that maybe a lot of readers who picked up this book didn't know about young Ben and his, upbringing and what had happened to him to turn him into Kylo Ren. And so maybe this would really add to their enjoyment of the sequel trilogy and that part of the story. So I thought that was just really exciting. And also that I was kind of discovering things as I was doing the research for it, because I hadn't had 20 years to really sit and think about this prior to that.
So you got to do a lot of really fascinating deep dives on characters that are profound to the saga, but don't get a lot of spotlight on them. Shmi, the Lars family, the Organas.
Yeah.
What's it like getting to do that research on them?
It was such a delight. Shmi was the very first Skywalker that I researched for the project, and I quickly realized that there's not a ton of lore about Shmi. I would have loved to spend so much more time on Shmi, but we were really kind of pulling everything in that we knew about her, which isn't a ton, to get her to the point where we were talking about Anakin. And then of course Anakin, there's just an embarrassment of riches and how much lore we have on Anakin. So kind of like the opposite problem, where with Shmi, I was like, do we have enough to do her justice? And with Anakin, I was like, where can we cut a little bit though? Because Anakin is wonderful, but we don't have time for a whole book on just Anakin. But it was really so much fun to look at this from the perspective of, if you're telling a biography, who are the people who are important to these characters, and who is essentially responsible for their formative years, and why later they might make some of the choices that they make. And so that was really interesting because, of course, Shmi is essential to Anakin, but in a very real sense, so is Qui-Gon, and of course Obi-Wan. And so we got to delve into a little bit more about some characters who weren't biologically related, but again, Star Wars is about found family, and the people who are your family by choice. And I think especially for the Jedi, a Jedi master teaching a Padawan is a incredibly complex and important relationship, especially during their formative years. So of course, for a biography, we got to touch upon that whole relationship and how that shapes some of Anakin's views. But of course, he's a little bit old to be trained when he starts out, so he already has some things kind of already. He's already kind of formed some ideas of the galaxy and his own perception. And, it's a little bit hard to kind of completely shake those loose and make him an ideal Jedi.
I feel like I've taken up enough time of your day, so I have one last question for you. Is there any upcoming projects you can talk about?
Yes. So glad you asked. Yes, we just finished revising Star Wars Year by Year. So the new edition of that will be coming out this September. Nice. And very excited for that. It was a little surreal to work on that project because so many awesome people have worked on previous editions. I think I'm following up Pablo Hidalgo, who is wonderful. Yes. And so as I was starting out with that project, of course, especially compared to Skywalker Family at War, we had much more of a roadmap of, how best to lay out these things, what kinds of news bits and information we wanted to incorporate. And it was still really surreal when I got to the point where, we had kind of this grid system of like, here are the news beats that we want to cover. And one of them was this week in Star Wars launches. And I was like, this is a weird time in my life to incorporate, like, yes, let's put down the show that I host in this book that I'm writing. What is my life? But such a delight to work on that, and I was so humbled to be asked because it's such an amazing book that so many people have worked on previously and put a lot of really amazing information in.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you said that's September.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so September, everybody has to check that out. In the meantime, everybody can check out Skywalker, A Family at War, and then you can check Kristin out every Thursday on Star Wars YouTube channel.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Thank you, everybody, for watching,
Bobby.
and for those that were able to donate to help us help First Robotics. And Kristin, may the Force be with you. Everybody watching, may the Force be with you.
And also with you.
Oh.